Welcome to In the Lab with Hoopsology. I am your host, Matt Thomas, joined by my co-host, Justin Goodrum, and my best friend, Justin. How you been, man?
Been doing pretty well, enjoying March Madness. I know I kind of have been saying that the last two times, but the tournament is in full swing, so it's been a lot of great action so far. So I've been really enjoying that. How about yourself, man?
Yeah, likewise. It's unfortunate that our New Mexico Lobos disappointed this year, knocked out in not even dramatic fashion, just kind of
Yeah, it was
just
ugly.
smacked out of the tournament
Yeah.
by Clemson. So, hey, shout out to Clemson. Good job. The Lobos were favorites as the 11th seed in the tournament against Clemson, and Clemson just showed up that day, and Lobos did not. Everyone's a Lobo. Sad, woof, woof, woof from us. But the tournament's fun nonetheless. Love seeing all the upsets and those kinds of things go down. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I don't want to get too far into that. Want to remind you guys about the content that we're putting out on YouTube and on the podcast. If you're subscribed, you're already in the know. We thank you for your support. Make sure you check out our most recent interviews, which are still very relevant. We had Noah Dalzell, who covers the Celtics. We had Charlie Watson, who covers the Timberwolves. Those interviews are still great listens. Those are our two most recent. Hope you've been enjoying those. Celtics fans, T-Wolves fans, and NBA fans in general. There's something there for everyone who's interested in basketball, and we have some great interviews coming up that I can't wait for you all to see. So once again, just want to say thank you so much for the support. We've seen some growth on our YouTube channel in recent days, and just very appreciative of that and excited to have more of you in on the conversation. So enough about that. Justin, I want to talk about, because we update on our teams every now and then from time to time, and I was pretty down in the dumps about the Rockets the last time we talked about them. They were just over 20 wins or so. I think they were in the 25 win range. Şengün had been injured. He's still injured with that severe grade 3 ankle sprain. He may come back before season's end. Not sure 100% yet. May even be reasons to shut him down beyond just injury concerns. And what I'm alluding to is, look out, Warriors. The Rockets are knocking at the door of potentially knocking you out of the last play-in spot for 10th place. Right now, as we speak, the Rockets have won 9 out of their last 10 out of their last 11 games. We'll see what happens in their next game, of course. But at the moment of recording, they are red hot. And the Golden State Warriors are sitting at a 36-34 record. The Rockets are 36-35. So technically just a half game back of that 10th spot. But as tends to happen, there's just maybe too much media out there. Here we are contributing to that problem maybe. But you know what? Anytime stuff like this happens, Şengün has been benched for this entire streak. And so talking heads are going to talk, especially after the All-Star break. Justin, long story short, should the Rockets be shopping Şengün at this point in time?
This is super bizarre. I mean, we talked off air, but this coming to my mind now. If they have a good deal for him, then I think you would entertain it. I would assume, right? I mean, you're the Rockets fan, so there's anybody that's actually worth it, or in terms of like, if it's a really good trade offer, would you take it? But otherwise, isn't he your future? I mean, I remember really during, I think we did our house party, Hoopsology house party. We had one of our good friends, Alan Munsler, on the show, and he was hyping up Şengün. You guys were just glowing about him, and I think that's very early in his career, and now he's kind of fulfilling what you guys saw in him before. So it's bizarre that he's being punished for an injury and he's performing. I would get if he's been in a disappointment, but he has not. So I don't really get these hardcore trade rumors. Are they coming from, you think, reliant Rockets sources, or are these fans that are saying this?
I think mostly fans, Bill Simmons had a little bit on his podcast where, like, kind of if you're in the GM room, if you're in the front office, you keep it on the down low, but you shop and see what's out there. I mean, honestly, I'm of the opinion that GMs and front offices are doing this anyway without this sort of prompting. I mean, you're not doing your due diligence if you aren't looking for what's out there and assessing value.
Sure.
My sense around the league is everyone has been sort of wait and see with Şengün. Like, how much of this season is real? How much of the first half of the year, especially when Şengün was putting up lots of numbers, how much of that is real? How much of that is sustainable? Is he baby Jokic or not? It's tough to tell with young players. Şengün, I believe, is 21 or maybe just turned 22. Uh,
Wow,
they're
he's young.
young. I mean,
Wow, yeah.
this whole team is pretty young, other than like your Fred Van Vliet, your Dylan Brooks, and those guys still aren't. I wouldn't say they're old players. They're the veterans that were brought in. They're pretty young for what we consider veterans in the league, at least traditionally speaking. I am not of the opinion that we should shop Şengün just as a Rockets fan. I think right now the kind of the argument is just, oh my goodness, the Rockets are faster, more athletic without him. They're maybe spacing the floor better with Jabari running at the 5 right now. Question would be, I mean, we've seen smaller players run at the 5 in this league, and even in this spread them out league, centers get run down. I mean, imagine Jabari having a guard like Joel Embiid. Imagine him having to try to contain and deal with Jokic. It's a grind on these players, and he's more used to being out in the perimeter than down in the post, and talking, really like both sides of the ball as a professional athlete. So I think that would be too much of a grind. The Rockets still don't have a great center option. Generally speaking, Şengün was filling that. He's still even a little bit undersized as a center. Also, I think in terms of scheming, athleticism only gets you so far. When you get to an intensity level like the playoffs, you need someone who can create both in the fast break, but also when things slow down. And I think that uniquely is what Şengün can do best on this team. And I think could translate into future playoff success. And we've seen that. I mean, case in point with Jokic, and yes, Şengün is not Jokic. I think there are big discrepancies between the two. I see the similarities, but size wise, rebound wise, and basketball IQ wise, still obviously Şengün much younger, still has time to develop, but needs to develop quite a bit to have that fair comparison with Jokic. But
Yeah.
long story short, Justin, as someone um, somewhat invested in the team anyway, I don't want to see Şengün go this early on.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you if I was a Rockets fan. I think it's premature unless you have some kind of phenomenal offer to get something equal or better value than that. So
And we're talking 3 years of build.
yeah,
To throw that away over an 11 game stretch would be, I think, a fatal mismanagement error.
agreed.
So let's move on to bigger topic stuff. I mean, I'm grateful that this Rockets chase for the play-in tournament is still a thing and can maybe be a fun narrative as we get towards the close of the season. Speaking of which, as we are chasing very, very close to the end of the regular season here, I think we are beyond 80% done with the regular season. I thought it would be a good time for us to look over NBA regular season awards odds and see what kind of discrepancies, concerns we might have. Do the odd makers have things right? Does it make sense where they're setting the odds? Are there any steals here in terms of the betting? Not that we're encouraging that, but hey, just hypothetically, if you were betting, how is this looking? So let's get into it. And we're just going to go right down the list. I have the awards pulled up, these odds from FanDuel, just the most recent and relevant that I could find. So that's what we're going to base this off of. And we'll start just with the Big Kahuna Award, the one that everyone, I think at this time last year, was arguing between Embiid and Jokic. That is, of course, the NBA regular season MVP award. And right now, there's really not much controversy, Justin. You and I talked about it in our last In the Lab, kind of giving a little bit of shine on Jason Tatum, just maybe showing that side of the narrative. But we have Jokic leading all minus 1100. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in second at plus 1,000. Luka Doncic plus 2,200. Giannis Antetokounmpo plus 9,000. And Jason Tatum plus 10,000. So in looking at that list, any weirdness that you see there, any surprises?
Only surprise is Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, just with that odds there, seems pretty far off. Seeing it at plus 1,000, that's pretty surprising to me. I would expect that to be a little bit closer. That tells me that the Joker's in firm position, and unless the Thunder just go on a massive run, it's I think it's a tie-in. I mean, it's a shoe-in for the Joker to win that award. I don't see anybody catching him based on these odds.
Yeah, I'm really surprised to see that as well. And
Mm.
that is exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I would have thought Shea maybe close to like breaking even there, or plus or minus 100 rather than plus 1,000. I agree. So maybe Vegas knows a little something about what the voters are going to do that we don't know.
Yeah.
Looking at the next award on our list here. Hey, kind of cool that this is second. We never talk about defense in the modern NBA, but we do on our show. And second on the list here in FanDuel, NBA Defensive Player of the Year. First, Justin, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe this was your pick, Rudy Gobert at
I believe
minus
so.
1,200.
Yeah.
I think you had him
The double check.
minus 1,200. Victor Wembanyama at plus 800. Pretty impressive for the rookie. As you talked about with Howard Beck on a recent episode, you guys be sure to check that one out as well. Bam Adebayo in third, plus 10,000. So a massive jump after Wemby. Jared Allen, I'm glad he's on the list because he was my pick. So I feel a little bit redeemed because I did not think he was going to make it when we were starting the season. Pretty rough for the Cavaliers. Plus 10,000 as well. Plus 11,000 for Anthony Davis. Any surprises for you there on that list?
Not too really. I mean, these are the usual suspects, so I'm not too surprised. Good to see Anthony Davis on that list as well. Probably a good indication about how healthy he has remained during the season. So overall, I think not being a defensive expert by any means, but I think it's good to see Rudy Gobert at the top of that list. This shows kind of how he's melding with the Timberwolves and their success, as we talked with Charlie Walton a week ago. So overall, not many surprises with that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that stands out is Gobert is on the team that is performing best out of the bunch.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like with Anthony Davis, I agree. He's been the best player on the Lakers this season, and totally agree. Glad he's healthy. But can you really say a Lakers player deserves Defensive Player of the Year when they're sitting at ninth in the Western Conference? I don't know.
That's
Maybe.
true.
Same thing with Wembanyama. I mean, with him, I think if the Spurs were contending even for a play-in tournament spot, he may be able to leapfrog Rudy Gobert a little bit easier, but it's not a good defensive team, the Spurs. Wembanyama is a great defensive player, no doubt, but it's not a good defensive team. So I think you get into kind of some of those arguments. But of course, Timberwolves sitting towards the top of the Western Conference, which nobody expected, or very few anyway. Rudy Gobert gets the nod. Kind of a nice little case for maybe he should actually be on the list, given how his season went last year, for our next award category, which is, of course, the Most Improved Player of the Year award. And here are four that are listed in the running here. Tyrese Maxey, minus 320. Probably everybody remembers his fire hot start to the season. Kobe White, Chicago Bull, is at plus 200. So fairly close there. And then a big gap here. Jonathan Kuminga is third, plus 13,000. And then Jalen Williams, plus 13,000 as well, of the Thunder. Surprises here, suggestions, anyone else who should be on this list?
Not any suggestions as additions to the list, but good to see Kobe White's really had a huge improvement this season. I know the Bulls record doesn't really necessarily reflect that, but he has taken a huge leap this year. Julia Poe on the Chicago Tribune has outlined that when we talked to her about a month ago. So overall, it's good to see kind of Kobe White being right next to Tyrese Maxey. I don't see him overtaking him, despite the Sixers missing Joel Embiid. But good to see Kobe White on that list and Jonathan Kuminga as well. I know there's been kind of a lot of negative talk about him with the Warriors, but seems like he has kind of come into fruition on that squad. So overall, I think a pretty solid list.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I would argue that Kobe White deserves the award over Maxey, just in terms of the, how do you put it? Kind of the, it feels more like a debut for Kobe White. We knew there
It
was
does. Yeah.
talent there for Tyrese Maxey, and it kind of feels like Harden just got out of the way. And credit to him, he lived up to it, and he's done well. He's definitely had all the opportunity in the world. Kobe White feels a little more like out of the blue, like a little bit more towards what I feel the nature of this
That's fair.
award should be like.
Yeah.
No, and that's no disrespect to Maxey. There's arguments both ways. Just feels to me like Kobe is the better narrative for this and better representative for this award. But we've seen this a lot of times in NBA history that you get more minutes, you get more opportunity, and you get this award. And nothing wrong necessarily with this. The other thing I'll add, and then we'll move on because this award is pretty minor, but I think Şengün would be on this list too had it not been for the injury that he took, with both the leap that he took with the stats he's putting up, as well as the Rockets' progress towards relevance again this season, the steps they've taken. I think he deserves kind of a tip of the cap, even though he's not, I don't think he's going to qualify
Yeah.
for this award when
I
it's all said
concur.
and done.
Yeah. Agreed.
Next, and this one is maybe the most analytical, statistical number of them all, and I do have at least one stat on this for you, Justin, but you'll like to hear this. NBA Clutch Player of the Year, maybe you already knew, DeMar DeRozan leads the field of contestants at minus 320. Steph Curry is next at plus 250. Damian Lillard, big jump here to plus 3,800. Shea Gilgeous Alexander plus 3,800 as well. And then Nikola Jokic plus 11,000. And finally, Kevin Durant at plus 16,000. We've seen in the past, like last season, which I believe was the first time this was awarded, De'Aaron Fox won this award, and it was because of his defined clutch time performance and the Kings' clutch time wins. And that honestly is why DeMar DeRozan leads this category. Just to let you know before I ask your thoughts, the Bulls were involved in 22 clutch wins. They've had 22 clutch wins this season. However that is defined, I believe it's games that are decided within the last 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And DeMar DeRozan was on the floor and also put up numbers in 20 of those 22 clutch wins that the Bulls have had. And the Bulls are at 31 wins now, I believe, for the season. So the argument there for DeMar is right there. How do you feel about him winning this clutch award? Any debate on how this should be awarded?
Yeah, I'm extremely biased, so I'll kind of avoid making a pick, but I will say with DeMar DeRozan, I think what stands him out from the others and on this list, and I take that back. I think what makes all these guys stand out is that they don't rely on just like the 3-point shot. They have a particular shooting preference. So for DeMar, loves the mid-range jumper, high range of probability that it's going to go in because it's an easier shot. So he's not the one just to take a ton of threes or take a ton of bad shots. Similarly to Kevin Durant, they're extremely efficient. So that means more clutch. So I'm not surprised he's leading the pack on this list at all. We'll kind of see, how it goes. I mean, you mentioned that this is a kind of more of a stats based category, but a lot of people voting on this league with their feelings. So guys
Sure.
with better seasons, better records, I can foresee, leapfrogging him in his category. But if you're going on basically the stats after you said, I think DeMar DeRozan is probably the pick. But the Bulls are so up and down this season, and he did get frustrated with I think he got ejected about a game ago. So I was recording of this podcast. So we'll see. I think I wouldn't label him as a shoo-in for this award. That's for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, and there is still time for players to catch up potentially. Like if Curry needs to make a big push for the Warriors to get into the play-in tournament, I think that'll impact voters rather than if the Bulls kind of stay steady. I believe you told me they're in ninth place right now in the
Yeah.
Eastern Conference. If that stays steady, it's going to feel less urgent. And I agree with you. Emotions might take over for the voters there. Moving on to our second to last award here, NBA Sixth Man of the Year. So the best contributor off the bench in the league. I don't think this is a surprise to people who have been following the league. Maybe so. Uh, we have a new candidate, Malik Monk, minus 1050, 1050. And he's got a sizable lead there over Naz Reid of the Timberwolves at plus 900. Then Norman Powell of the Clippers at plus 3,000. Bobby Portis of the Bucks plus 5,000. Karis LeVert plus 7,500 of the Cleveland Cavaliers, and Tim Hardaway Jr. at plus 12,000. He was much more at the forefront of this discussion earlier in the year. Tim Hardaway Jr. was. Thoughts on this award? Is it appropriate that Malik Monk has this wide of a lead here?
Yeah, not much thoughts on this. Six man is an award that I'll be blunt, not super interested in. But I will say with Bobby Portis, I did see some of him within the past week or so. I think he's an underrated part of the Milwaukee Bucks, and I'm biased. He played for the Bulls, so maybe that's why I have a soft spot for him. But I think he's really, really showing up in terms of his how he's important for the Bucks. So shout out to him. But not too many thoughts on the six man award.
I think Malik Monk fits the mold of this award traditionally very well. So I think it makes sense that he is leading. Um, and I think as far as bench contributors, I'm honestly a little surprised. I know the Timberwolves are considered contenders, maybe more than the Clippers, maybe not. I am surprised, I guess, by the gap between Powell and Naz Reid there from second to third. It's like a plus 2,100 difference between the two. But it is what it is. I don't think anything there is unreasonable. Let's go to our last category, wrap it up, and then we'll get to some bigger topics here, maybe in terms of impacting the whole league, what may be coming down the road. But before we do that, NBA Coach of the Year, another one that maybe is not the most attractive award to talk about, but I think usually it's a little bit underrated, the discussion around NBA Coach of the Year. We have Mark Daigneault is the favorite, coach of the Thunder, of course, minus 420. Jamal Mosley of the Magic, plus 500. Chris Finch of the Timberwolves, plus 1,200. Joe Mazzulla of the Boston Celtics, plus 1,900. And then a big jump to Rick Carlisle of the Pacers, plus 17,000. And JB Bickerstaff, plus 17,000. Thoughts on Coach of the Year? Anyone missing from there? Do you like Daigneault being the favorite at this point? What are you seeing and thinking?
Yeah, I like this list. And maybe it's my kind of Bulls loyalty that's kind of clouding my judgment, but I think Tibbs maybe deserves a mention on here a little bit for the next. Now I don't think he should win it by any means. So I think that should be I don't want to give that impression, but certainly a shout out to him for the New York Knicks. We'll see what the playoffs happen, just because he's known for wearing out his players in the regular season, or they have nothing left in the playoffs. So that is another issue there. But I think he deserves a mention. As for the rest of the guys on this list, I really think it's going to come down to the Western Conference, and if OKC has a better record than the Timberwolves, and vice versa. I mean, you have two coaches, I think, with teams that have not been in either the playoff mix for a long time, or this is their first like a foray into being a top contender. And this could be a very transformative season. I think based on the regular season, it's going to come down to who wins the conference, or who has the better record, coming right behind the Denver Nuggets. So I think it's kind of a pick 'em. I mean, it's tough. I really think you got to give Degensoldt and Chris Finch a lot of props for what they've done with these franchises too. So I don't know. I think take your pick. I think just due to kind of the rebuild and everything going on with kind of the younger components, I would go with Degensoldt. But if people were to pick Chris Finch, I wouldn't have too many objections to that.
Yeah, Chris Finch. It's surprising to me how much lower he is in third place than those other two. I
Yeah.
honestly, if I were a voter, I would vote for him. I think the Magic and the Thunder, while it's impressive how they're doing with how young they are, in terms of the actual coaching job, I would I would throw my hat in the ring for Chris Finch, just because there have been established egos in place there in Minnesota that he's had to uh, retrain habits and things like that. I think he's maybe behind the scenes had done the more impactful job. I don't know. It's a tough argument because youth can be very inconsistent too, and we don't typically see it rise to the level that OKC and the Magic have had. With OKC, you're getting SGA in there, who even last season I was saying is a top 10 player easy in the league, and that has borne itself out playing through this season. I think. So there's a lot of good arguments here. A lot of people just saying, well, why don't we just give it to Coach Spoelstra? Like things like that. Like Spoelstra didn't forget how to coach. Yes, that's this, I think, even more so maybe than the NBA MVP award. Interestingly enough, the Coach of the Year award is very, very prone to voter fatigue. You don't see many
Yeah.
coaches win this award more than once, if ever.
No, true. And I also mentioned Willie Green of the Pelicans.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, this is a team that a lot of doubts about Zion. He is coming into his own. I think the return of Zion Williamson is probably one of the biggest shocks on here. And if you take a look at most improved player, where's Zion on this list? I mean, I get it. He's a superstar player, but look at all the crap that he's taken. I mean, the criticism that we've given him on the show. I mean, other analysts, and he has been phenomenal this season. So I think shout out to the Pelicans. I know the West is pretty close. So I mean, right now they're fourth. They could end up, certainly, you know, possibly like the seventh seed or even the eighth seed. It's so close between all those teams. But right now, they're the fourth seed right now. They maintain that. I think shout out to Willie Green. I mean, this is a team that's always dealing with lots of criticism. They're really underrated in terms of the rest of the NBA world paying attention to them, and they're in the thick of it. So I think he deserves a shout out as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good shout out, warranted for sure. So we've talked a lot about odds with these awards. Odds are involved in gambling, and gambling is a big story in the NBA right now. We want to make sure to cover that here. Justin, fill us in. What are you hearing and seeing? What's going on with gambling in the NBA?
Yeah, so gambling scandals is really big in all of sports, and we'll get to that in a second. But concerning the NBA, according to NBA.com, the NBA is investigating Raptors forward Jonte Porter, who is the brother of Michael Porter Jr., after multiple instances of betting irregularities. The league is looking into prop bets involving Porter from games played on January 26th to March 20th. So I'm not a betting expert, and I would highly encourage to watch a video created by our former guest and friend of the show, Casey Kieran of AM Hoops, that just
Mm,
goes into further detail as into why the NBA is going into this, why Porter is in trouble, why this might be centered to more basketball players that your casual fan doesn't care about, and not your LeBron Jameses, SGAs, Kevin Durant, so on. So this is basically caught the eye of the sports world because of what's happened also in Major League Baseball with Shohei Ohtani. That's a whole different
yeah.
issue. Go look into that as well. And if you want to go into really, I would think in this new era of betting, legalized sports betting, the UFC, during the pandemic with James Krause, who was a MMA trainer with his fighters as well, involved into a huge betting scandal, like they got the authorities of the FBI involved. So this is not just a isolated incident that just happened within the NBA. This is happening with a lot of sports as well. So, Matt, I don't know if you have any thoughts or you have a clip to play as well regarding the story within the NBA regarding gambling.
I don't have the audio set on that, unfortunately, but um, my thing is, I struggle to see. It's good from a business standpoint that the NBA is making an example here, being proactive about this. Moving forward, I don't know how they're going to regulate this and make sure that it's not a factor that calls into question the credibility of the league itself, because I think that is the internal problem, is that if a team is losing a game or something like that, or you have a guy and this was the point of the around the horn point. I want to make sure I give credit to David Dennis Jr. was making. He said it's crazy. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's crazy that uh, a player that you could bet on a prop bet that a player at the tail end of the bench in garbage time is going to be able to impact. Um, and I think it's just going to be so difficult to regulate that and prove that. And if this story blows up more than what I'm seeing so far, because right now I feel like we're just getting
It's
some
pretty
rumblings of
isolated.
this new
Yeah,
news. Yeah. If this blows up and becomes not just on ESPN, but on like your mainstream news networks, those types of things where it's getting nationwide coverage in the main news circuit. For those of you that are still watching the news, I think that that will make people, just that association to it being a national news story will call into question the credibility of the league itself, which I think is a huge concern. And the league has already had issues with refs allegedly
it's
fixing
true.
games and those kinds of things. You've had
Yeah,
the Tim Donaghy thing. There's already smoke here when it comes to the NBA and gambling, which is why many people, you know, a lot of people laughing off people being concerned about gambling in sports and those kinds of things. Well, with the NBA, it's maybe no laughing matter because there are ties to this in the past. So I do think they need to be worried about it. I could not begin to tell you how I think they're going to regulate it. I'm glad I don't have to figure that out.
so here's what I would say, and to your point, look at I think Tyrese Halliburton during a press conference, he
Yeah.
said he's had different issues with gambling as well. So I have a multitude of thoughts. One, I kind of think this is very similar to Napster. I don't want to get you in trouble, Matt, but did you, if you don't want to answer this question, that's cool with me. Did you have Napster when you were younger? The program Napster.
I actually did not have Napster,
Okay, so
believe it or not.
you're in the
And
clear.
I'm not just saying that to seem like a goody two shoes or anything. I really didn't. One of my best friends did. He burned me. I
There
think
you
even
go.
a Metallica CD, I think, which would tick off Metallica. I know. I'm sorry, Lars. I'm sorry, James
Right.
Hetfield. It was like one album way back when. I'm sorry.
So I'll throw myself under the bus. So I was into downloading music, along with people all over the world. So if you take a look at the music downloading craze, basically the government was far behind in tracking this always. So it's kind of whack-a-mole. So you have Napster, then you have Kazaa, then you have LimeWire, then you have torrents, then you have this, you have that. So basically, the government's always 3 and 4 steps behind. I think with gambling, this is legal, and so to me, I think it's one of those things where there needs to be tighter regulations. And I think with the UFC, they did that. And I think to me, they clamped down on like, I think, trainers, um, and this is the UFC, so not all of mixed martial arts, but the UFC. Trainers, fighters, they're not allowed to bet at all. And I think in the NBA, that should be like a hardcore policy. You should not be able to bet on any sports, period. No, you can't bet on hockey, fighting, nothing. You lose that privilege. And I that might be draconian, but I think in order to keep the integrity of the sport involved, I think there needs to be a lot of regulation regarding that. And I think that's going to eliminate a lot of things. And Casey Kieran had a really good point because if you take a look at the NBA, the average NBA salary is $10 million. So for your high ranking players, do they really need to bet on sports? I don't think so. But with Jonte Porter, I mean, he had a two-way contract. And so he makes close, I would say roughly 500,000. Casey Kieran has the full figure. But point is, compared to his brother who has a max, close to a max deal, I mean, that's chump change. So the pressure to make money compared to your peers is a lot more, even though, I mean, to us, we would like to have a $500,000, but to him, he is on the lower end of the spectrum of what his peers are making. So I think within the NBA, I do agree with Casey that a lot of the players, they make enough to where I don't think this is going to be a super prevalent issue. And I think to your casual fan, I don't know if they're going to really notice, but if the NBA is hardcore getting into gambling, they're going to put a team in Vegas. Adam Silver's full steam ahead on this. You have to have super tight regulations. And to me, honestly, if I'm Adam Silver with Jonte Porter, I know this is going to seem draconian and hardcore. He should be banned from if this is proven, he should be banned from the league. There should be no second chance. He's gone. Period. He's gone. You have to lay down a hammer. If you're going to get in bed with FanDuel, DraftKings, all of these companies, you need to be hardcore, and you need to be basically no second chances regarding this because the integrity of the sport is on the line here. And I don't equate it to because everybody says, "Well, it's going to become professional wrestling." It's not. It's not the same thing. The wrestling industry was already a work from the get-go. It had nothing to do with gambling. They're trying to portray a performance, whereas the NBA, you're trying to rig the outcomes to make money. That's not the same equation. So I think people, when they make that equation, they just think, oh, well, wrestling's a work. They use the work. It's fake. They want to apply it to other things. This is not the same thing. This is I think, a lot more dangerous because you have a lot more, I think, unsavory figures trying to, I guess, rig the outcome of the game. And then you have conflicting forces where you have some people that want to win. You have other people that don't have the best interest of the teams the best interest of the teams at the core of their thinking when they're participating. So I agree with you. There's a concern about gambling. I don't really have too much issue of gambling involved in sports. Again, that video Casey Kieran reference, Europe has had gambling for years. And the biggest scandal was with the lower teams, not the higher teams within there. So I don't have an issue, but I do think the punishment should be severe. I think it should be quite harsh. And I don't know how that's going to go with the Players Association because I think the NBA is one of the best unions in all sports. So I doubt I'm going to get what I want in terms of just dropping the hammer. But, at the same time, I do think, like you said, Matt, this is a concern. If they don't nip it in the bud, I think this is going to threaten Adam Silver's long-term plans for sure.
Here's the other thing to add to what you've said, and I don't disagree with anything you've mentioned, but I will say that with the issue of Porter here,
Yeah.
who may be punished, likely will be punished in some form for this.
Yeah.
We've had a history of stars in the NBA who are very big on gambling. The great one, Michael Jordan himself. Again,
Sure.
not saying he was betting on the sport or anything like that. Sure, there's conspiracy theories on it, all those things that you can look into, but there is a big tie-in, and it's more than just about making money. It's like another competitive itch for
That's true.
these superstars.
Good point. That's true.
You had like Barkley as well.
That's true.
It's well known. I mean,
Both.
he gambled himself into bankruptcy
Yeah.
at one point. So there are other things, there are real problems with gambling on a societal level. And I want to show you this just as kind of a thought. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I just want to present it. And it comes from Haralbob Vulgaris, who have enjoyed listening to on shows. He used to, I believe, be a consultant for the Dallas Mavericks for a little while there. But first, to give you context, LeBron James posted, this was actually a while back. This was in January, posting King times King. Football season just got a lot more fun. Let's go at DraftKings, hashtag DK partner, DraftKings partner. So basically, LeBron James is endorsing DraftKings for gambling. A lot of athletes endorse gambling sites at this point. LeBron's not the only one, to be sure. Haralbob, and let me check the date on this, March 22nd. So not very long ago, which is kind
Yeah.
of interesting. Must have had this bookmarked for a while since King James posted this back in January 31st. But anyway, Haralbob says, quote, "You're famous enough to have your pick of nearly any endorsement deal. You're rich enough where the amount they are paying you won't have a meaningful impact on your life. Being a partner in societal collapse doesn't seem that fun to me. You're better than this, King. I would implore you to spend some time with some disadvantaged, I think he means, young people who've had their lives turned upside down by gambling." So I present this just as an interesting thing to keep tabs on as gambling explodes. Obviously, we all hope this is not the case, but gambling addiction is serious. It's always, I don't know if irony is the right word, but it's just odd to me that we get the gambling addiction hotlines anytime you have
All the
gambling
time.
ads. Like
Yeah.
it goes hand in hand. It's like, why are we advertising this when this is such a huge problem to a lot of people? I have people that I've known closely impacted by gambling addiction, so I do think this is a big thing to keep tabs on just as a society in general, and obviously hoping that sports gambling doesn't add to this negative impact. Obviously, I think this is something you can do responsibly. I'm not one of those who says gambling should be banned altogether or something, but I just find it a very interesting take. Maybe he's being a little too critical of LeBron in particular there. What are your thoughts on this bigger society at large thing? And then we'll move on
Yeah.
to something more fun.
Yeah. No, I think this is great to talk about. And hopefully, so we love to have gambling experts on there. I want to get their thoughts as well in the
Yeah.
coming weeks. So I think this is a very interesting point. I disagree with the point, but I think it's interesting to raise. So one thing, League Pass. So there's been some discussions of bringing league, and I think this is already going to happen, where you're going to see live odds during League Pass if you have a subscription. And
Mm.
then if you're on Max, so I think this was like a couple of weeks ago. I think it was your TNT doubleheader. So you have Max, it's the formerly HBO Max, now it's Max. So if you have that subscription service, if you watch, I don't know, Bulls versus Rockets, right? You can watch an alternative broadcast that's on NBA TV that they go over the prop bet. So Adam Lefko hosts it. And then you have two other betting experts who are on there, and they're just basically going around the league talking about betting, and they're discussing the prop bets within the game itself. So the difference between, I think, now with the floodgates being open with legalized betting, and there's another great special, I think, for I encourage our viewers to check out. Outside the Lines did a great 2-part documentary on betting and just about the influence on sports. So check that out. It's on our YouTube page. But if you take a look of sports betting being legalized around the country now compared to before, it's really pretty difficult to bet, right? Like you kind of had to go through a lot of hoops and loops to get your bets in, or just bet within your office pool, whatever. Now it's way easier, and I think fantasy really opened the floodgates towards this, because I think that was kind of like, it's not gambling, but like I think that really opened the door to making gambling okay is through
Yeah, you're
fantasy
right. It
sports.
was the gateway.
Yeah, it's the gateway. It's the gateway drug, to make a comparison. So now with gambling, it's being infused in basically every sport that you see. And I think that's very tempting for younger people. And I think there's evidence to that. based on microtransactions in video games.
Yeah,
I mean, this
great
it's the
point.
same. It's the same thing. So to me, I am with you, man. I am not one of these people either that is for ban gambling. And in fact, I am intrigued by gambling. I won't gamble. I think it's not appealing to myself, but I'm intrigued about how people can pick different bets and how it affects everything. And it's pretty much, I think it's like a stock market where people that actually take it seriously, I think you can make a decent amount of money depending on how you use it. But like with anything else, it could be used irresponsibly. They can rule and ruin lives. I don't personally, to me, I think we've talked about this on this show. LeBron, if you want to go after endorsement deals of athletes, which is worth Nike or DraftKings, I'm going to go Nike with China. I mean, let's just keep it real here. I mean,
Fair point.
I mean, if you want to kind of, I mean, let's just keep it real here. So to me, kind of, I don't mind overall the implementation of gambling, but I mean, sit here being a liar, say I wouldn't be concerned about how it's going to be influenced on all these different campaigns. Adam Silver, I'm trying to remember, he was on with Charles Barkley and Gail King, and he was talking about the future of the broadcast and how you might be able to watch the broadcast in 5 different ways. You might be able to watch the influencer broadcast, a gambling broadcast, a players broadcast, and then the regular broadcast. So gambling is, I think, it's going to be normalized for a lot of younger people compared to when we were growing up and younger, where it's kind of taboo and there was the risk involved. Now it's normal because we're such in a society of instant gratification, and I
Yeah.
think that's where the danger lies. So I would say proceed with caution. I think regulation is important, but I'm kind of like it. Kind of feel the same thing about weed. I mean, I never understood why people were so against that, and I think especially within now, I realize it's totally different, but with medical marijuana, that has a positive effect on athletes. Gambling is recreation; it's purely recreational, so there is a difference there. But I do think overall with gambling, yeah, I want to disagree with you, Matt, in terms of it not being an issue, but I kind of do agree with you. I mean, it's just the technology implementation of how you're going to see gambling in every single sport and every single broadcast and in the arenas, and then under your seat if you're going to a sporting event, it's going to happen. I mean, it's
Yeah.
inevitable. It's happening now. So I think for younger people, yeah, I do deem it a concern. This losing money is going to be normalized, and I don't. To me, I feel guilty. I think I went to a casino and lost $30. I mean, I felt guilty for 2 weeks. So it's like I lost $30. Like it's just like I could have used that money just anywhere else, and it was just like I just gave it away. So I think that is a concern. I'm not going to lie to you.
Hey, losing $30 is pretty much winning when you're talking about gambling.
Right?
If
Yeah.
that's
No, it's
all you
true.
lost.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree with a lot of those points. Look, plain and simple at a larger level too, and I'll stop here because we could talk about this
We can.
forever. But
Yeah.
we're a society that's full of addiction,
Mhm.
whether people see it or not. I mean, you look at how social media is engineered to keep you on there, and I don't care. Pick your platform. I'm not even singling out one. We look at um, how this is all built. I mean, gambling is just another option that's out there as an addiction that you could easily get. Problem is, it can be a lot more destructive than just taking up your time, like some other addictions do. There are addictions, obviously, that have big health consequences. Gambling is one that could
Yeah.
ruin you financially. So
Yeah.
I do, urge people to proceed with caution. I understand though the appeal, and if you're doing it responsibly with your buddies on something or whatever, there's a lot of fun to potentially be had there too. I just really urge people, do it responsibly. Um, Having said that, Justin, I wanted to end on kind of more of a high note after that
Sure.
heavier ish topic.
Mhm.
Well, any last thoughts on gambling before we move on that? I'm sorry, I want
No,
to give you a
no, no,
chance for
no.
closing
No,
if
no,
you
you
got.
covered it. Yeah,
Yeah,
just I think it's just something to watch, and I think that Tyrese Halliburton, his comments concern me the most because it seems like he's just being personally impacted by people watching the games, and that guy's just going out there not only trying to make a living but fulfilling his dream and trying to help his team. He has to worry about some dude's prop bet. Like, who cares? Like, that's your fault for betting money. Like, sucks to be you. Like, you shouldn't be giving Tyrese Halliburton crap about him just living his life and pursuing his dreams. So that's where my concern is. But we could talk about this for another hour or so. So I think it's I think it's best to move on. But to me, the players' enjoyment of the game, that's another concern. I mean, you might get players that quit just due to this other pressure that shouldn't be there. So
Yeah, and I would say also on the other side of that, if I can play devil's advocate, I mean, Tyrese Halliburton really should not be worrying about what a fan thinks of his betting
well,
experience.
if
Like,
they're getting if you're getting threatening messages, I think I think that was the key. I don't think it was just let me just see if I can pull this up real quick. But
yeah,
I think it was a little bit more than just like some people
I
complaining.
remember seeing the quote. I've just like, dude, you're a stud. You shouldn't be checking messages.
Yeah,
But I know players have their accounts and things like that. I get it, but man, maybe just use some of your super max money that you have earned and that you're blessed to play basketball for. Pay someone to run your
sure.
social media.
I agree.
Definitely on the other end too. Of course,
I agree.
don't heckle Halliburton. You're a loser if you're doing that. But
That's true. Fair enough.
it's a little bit odd to be, I think, impacted by it like that. Like, dude, you make 40 plus million a year to play this sport. Yeah, you don't deserve the negativity again, of
Sure.
course. But man,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I agree though. It's a bummer that that that's kind of in the back of his mind,
Yeah. No, true.
or maybe at the front of his mind at times, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so moving forward, just wanted to get your thoughts, Justin. We mentioned March Madness at the very top.
Yeah.
We'll close with that. What have you seen? Men's tournament,
Yeah.
women's tournament, etc. That you're noticing, keeping track of, that you're liking. Main thing for me was our dear Lobos losing, which unfortunately was the very first round. So I haven't been totally checked out. I've been watching here and there, but took the wind out of my sails a little bit in the tournament. I will admit.
Yeah, on the men's side, agreed. And my bracket is in shambles, is based on my own personal
Mine too.
emotion. So it was unusual tournament because I follow the Lobos, as we've talked about. Also follow HBCUs. My dad is an alumni of Grambling State University, so Grambling got into the tournament, and then also Howard got into the tournament as well. So those were three teams that I was tracking, and Howard and Grambling not expected them to really do anything. They really performed in our conference tournament. That's why they got into the big dance. The Lobos kind of, we talked about this. If they didn't win the Mountain West, they wouldn't have got into the NCAA tournament. They had to run the table. So
Mm,
seeing them play Clemson, I wasn't that impressed. I can see why the committee he disrespected him. I agree. I mean, Clemson was just a way better team, way better shooters, and really the Lobos. I mean, for them being blown out the majority of that game, they had their chances. I mean, Clemson. I mean, there was probably they had 3 or 4 possessions in a row. They didn't really do anything. The Lobos didn't capitalize on it, and
yeah.
I think in the tournament you cannot commit turnovers and you cannot commit bad shots, and that's what the Lobos did. I mean, they deserved to lose. So I don't think, to me, based on because I didn't really watch them in the regular season in conference play, but seeing them just lose games at home, that was just a red flag to me. I mean, you can't lose home games at the Pit, especially that many. I mean, if you're losing to kind of top contenders, whatever, but they kind of went on a slide. And then even the games on the road, I was like, yeah, I just don't know what their chances are. So it shocked me when they ran the table in the Mountain West Conference tournament. So that's my first observation. Um, Other than that, San Diego State going to the Sweet 16 despite the Lobos beating them. I mean, that's crazy. They
Yeah.
pretty much beat them handily, and
Yeah.
and now
More
they're in
than once.
and now they're in the Sweet 16. So that's crazy. So I think that's indicative of with how San Diego State runs their program. I think it's pretty incredible. With the women, I think a couple of observations. One, the ratings, huge ratings for Caitlin Clark, massive ratings at the recording of this podcast. Them advancing to the Sweet 16 and a potential matchup with LSU. I mean, that's the big money matchup, just in terms of just the Elite Eight and the two power teams with Kim Mulkey, she's in the news, and Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark. And I think just from a basketball perspective, I think Iowa's kind of vulnerable. I mean, they didn't play great last night.
They haven't looked
And
great in the tournament, in my
yeah,
opinion. I
they
mean,
didn't look
they're a
great.
1 seed.
Yeah. And really, honestly, it's going to really be dependent on Caitlin Clark. She might have to score 40 for them to win. So we'll see what happens. Another observation is a lot of top seeds are winning. And I think this is a rule change that they implemented on 2014 that they wanted the top seeds for their first round for basically if you're the higher seed, you get home court advantage. I don't like that. I mean, to me, this is a neutral site tournament. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think you should be giving these power teams that already have a huge talent disparity already another advantage of playing at home. I understand you want the attendance. That doesn't make any sense to me, in my opinion. I think you can maybe split the difference where maybe you play it in maybe the same state but a different arena or a state over. Like, I don't like it that your top power teams have 2 games at home. I'm like, really? You're going to give Iowa a home court advantage or South Carolina, they're undefeated, like, or USC? Like, I think that's unfair, in my opinion. Um, but other than that, it's very interesting because I feel like with college basketball fans and with analysts, I mean, I feel like they complain with the men's tournament, there's too much parity and there's not enough stars. But in the women's tournament, you have all the stars and you have your power teams, and yet they're complaining about lack of upsets. Like, what do you want? Which one do you want? I mean, you have both of them in which tournament? I mean, I feel like what is the perfect tournament? Because you're getting one tournament, you have all the power teams, you have all the big stars, which I'm more inclined to be into. The men's tournament, I'm like, whatever. Like, I think San Diego State and USC, sorry, San Diego State, UConn, excuse me, I'm into in the men's tournament. But in the women's tournament, I am more into the stars and the, what's going on with the women. I mean, you got, Juju Watkins, Caitlin Clark. You have what's going on with LSU and South Carolina. I mean, that seems to be more compelling with what's going on in the women's side of things with the stars there. But I just don't know what fans want with college basketball because I see complaints with the women's side, but yet the men's the completely opposite, and people are just using their minds. So I don't know.
Yeah. People will always complain about the tournament one way or the other.
Sure.
I think is the ultimate lesson. I think it's a good point. It takes away a lot of the thrill to get rid of the neutral courts. I mean, one of the most endearing things about the tournament is the upsets, whether people
Yeah, I agree.
want to admit it or not. You
Yeah.
always want to have one or two Cinderella teams. So to get rid of or to lower your chances of that, I think is a really big mistake. And I hope they change that back. I am curious, we have some of the biggest star power in terms of the tournament that the women's game has ever seen, or at least since the UConn Tennessee rivalry was really a big thing. So I'm curious to see, not this year, but next year and the years that follow, what is the staying power like of these ratings? How much of this is in itself like a generational talent like Caitlin Clark coming in? And not that she's 100% the ratings,
Sure.
of course not. But
Yeah.
I do wonder if it's going to leave a bit of a vacuum once she goes professional after this season.
Yeah.
And I don't know. We'll have to keep tabs on that and kind of address that in the
I
future.
think it's permanent. I mean, look at Kelsey Plum, look at Sabrina Ionescu, look at Paige Buckers. I think the power of social media is that you have a lot of younger fans knowing who these players are, as opposed to some of them just coming out of nowhere. They're a freshman. And now you have with Ball's Life, and I mean, a plug for them, we're on their website, but sites like Ball's Life with other sites that are actually tracking a lot of these prep athletes. Now, there is cons to that. But the pro is that, I mean, I heard about Paige Bucker since she was in high school, Sabrina Ionescu since she was in high school. I mean, you're hearing about more of these athletes because there's visibility on them compared to your ESPNs and just national TV. And, especially for women's basketball, they've been held back by television coverage. Now, you have this other medium that people can just have access to, the social media, the internet. So I think that's a huge factor. Now, I don't know if we'll get, the Caitlin Clark numbers, like you were saying, Matt, in the future. However, I do think that in terms of women's college basketball, as long as we see the coverage, as long as we just see the consistency, I do think it's here to stay in terms of, the popularity. I really do. And I do I watched the coverage of the women's game. I enjoyed it seeing, you saw Holly Rowe being like, hey, there's so-and-so, here's a story about them. There's a story about this player, that player, like getting to know them. That was a huge difference. I don't even think I see that in the men's game, quite honestly. So I think that's a huge improvement. So I know I've been very, very hard on ESPN with their coverage on the women's basketball, but I think the tournament, I was impressed. I mean, I pretty much watched it all this weekend, and great, halftime coverage, great commentary, really great just within just the silent reporters. Even watching Grambling, I mean, that's an HBCU. I mean, no one cares about SWAC women's basketball, I'll be honest, except a very niche audience. And that coverage was great. I mean, I was impressed by that. And that was on ESPN Plus. So, and I don't want to make it seem that, no one cares about it. I'm just saying a niche. Like, that's a very niche fan following for SWAC
Right.
women's college basketball. And I thought that coverage was phenomenal too. So overall, I think I've been bashing ESPN. Just want to give them their flowers. I think they've done a great job. And I think based on that, they continue. I don't see a ratings drop off as people expect with Caitlin Clark going to the WNBA, in my opinion.
Yeah, one interesting thing I've seen, and I do agree, I think women's basketball has been pushed more this calendar year than in all previous calendar years.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's certainly a big push for it, and I think you're seeing the same thing on social media. It seems like there's more push, more conversation around it than ever. The other thing that I thought was interesting that I looked up is how many brackets the fans have been filling out
Yeah.
between the tournaments, and there is still a pretty big difference between the men's and women's game. Just to give you the numbers that I've seen for this tournament so far, 31 million brackets filled out for the men's game, and 3.25 million for the women's tournament. So I don't know if some of that is shyness, maybe new fans getting into it that don't really know the teams all that well compared to the men's tournament, uh, and how to feel about maybe the traditional powers that they know a history of. I don't know. That's pure speculation. But there is still, and also, there are gambling ties here. I don't know how
Yeah.
much interest is plugged in filling out a women's bracket versus a men's bracket, but there is a pretty significant difference there. It's almost 10 times more men's brackets being filled out than women's.
Yeah.
Um, make of that what you will.
It is different too. You have to wonder less upsets in the women's game. Does that make people? I mean, how does that tie into filling out both? I filled out both this year, and I usually don't. So, and honestly, it was a lot easier for the women's game to fill out the bracket because all the favorites win. I mean, the stats prove that for the most part. There's less upsets. So, in my mind, it's easier to associate. Hey, there's stars here, there's stars here, there's stars here. College basketball is kind of like, like who's really popping. I mean, all the elite players, they're playing overseas or, they're playing in overtime or G League or something. So, I mean, it's very different. I mean, you're kind of going on kind of your traditional, oh, yeah, Duke's really good always. North Carolina's really good always. And you don't really have those players associated. So it's kind of different thought process with the men's and women's tournament. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I do think it's big problem that the men's game is facing that eventually, I don't know if that comes to a head or not.
Well, they want to expand the tournament, which I think is ridiculous. Like that, there's been calls for
Yeah.
that, which I think it's a massive mistake. Just put all 300 teams in there. put every team in college basketball. Like, what are we doing? Like, put
Yeah.
all the teams in there.
Yeah. No, there's plenty of opportunity to get into the tournament. So I don't think
Yeah,
that needs adjusting.
me either. Yeah.
We got to go. It's been a great hour chatting basketball with you, Justin, as always. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts on all these topics. Is NBA gambling going to end the NBA? Let us know. Is the end near? Give us your hot takes or just your rational takes too. We'll take those as well. We got to get going. Thank you as always for your support. For Justin Goodrum, I'm Matt Thomas. Take care. We will talk to you again soon. Peace out.
See you next time.